Welcome, everyone. We will get started in just a few minutes. We're in the process of letting everybody in from the waiting room. Welcome, welcome. We are still admitting folks in from the waiting room, but I see those numbers ticking up. We're so glad that you can be here with us tonight. We'll get started in just a few minutes. All right, it looks like most everyone is in from the waiting room, though I'm sure we'll have some folks joining us as we get started. My name is Erin Lurie, and I manage our Hillwood's public programs for adults. I'm so pleased that you could join us this evening. This is a Zoom webinar, which means that you can make yourself very, very comfortable. Your cameras and microphones are not on, so feel free to crunch all of the potato chips or anything else. But that does not mean you're off the hook. We do want to hear from you. We would love for you to be submitting questions, say hello to each other through the chat. And as things come up, as you have questions throughout the program, please feel free to submit them through this Q&A module right here. When you submit those questions, we will save them to the end and we'll answer them live at the end of the program. Feel free to submit those questions as they are coming up, though. Please do. And as I mentioned, my role at Hillwood is with the public programs. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we have a great month of September coming up. There are details about all of these programs and more on our website, which is where you can also register. So please join us. I hope that we will see you there. But in the meantime, I'd like you to join me for a very warm welcome for design legend, tastemaker, and great friend of Hillwood, Charlotte Moss, who's going to get us kicked off this evening. All right, thank you, Charlotte.
I'm here. Good evening. I'm Charlotte Moss, and I'm delighted to be here at Hillwood, even if it is virtually this evening. I'm trying to channel being there to get in the mood to discuss Kate's book tonight. But I just want to say, a couple of years ago, there was an exhibition at Hillwood called The Artistic Table. And we had a lot of fun doing that exhibition. But during that time, I had the luxury of spending some time with Kate talking about this book that she was researching on all the gardens at Hillwood. And here we are, 2020, fast forward 2 years, and A Garden for All Seasons is in our hand. Also a book that I was honored to have the opportunity to write the foreword to. Marjorie Merriweather Post was the quintessential femme formidable. She needs no introduction. As her legacy of philanthropy, collecting, style, along with her appetite for travel, her unique diplomatic skills, her business acumen, they are all ever present in the home that she has gifted to the public. Her instincts for architecture and design were certainly gainfully employed when she bought Hillwood in 1957. That was 2 years of restoration at the age of 70, when most of us are thinking about retiring. Some people maybe already have, but Marjorie was in the throes of restoring Hillwood. In creating the house, she considered the garden and what gardens would be seen from each room in the house, like any skilled architect would do. But also, as the great hostess that she was, she considered what guests might want from the garden. And that would be places for solitude, for calm, and of course, beauty. As a member of the International Council, I can tell you that Hillwood is a magnificent place, created by and maintained by some extraordinary women. So while I look forward to my next visit, in the meantime, we'll enjoy the virtual garden tour that Kate is going to give us this evening. So now it is my pleasure to introduce you and turn you over to the expert, Kate Markert. Kate?
Okay, here we are. Thank you, Charlotte. That was so nice. I'm so glad that you could be here tonight. And I'm really grateful for all of the support that you've given me throughout this whole process. And what you should know is that the title, A Garden for All Seasons, was actually Charlotte's idea. So she has played a huge role in the creation of this book. So anyway, welcome to the very much delayed launch of our new book. We wanted, of course, to have a live book launch and be able to sign copies and all that sort of thing. But of course, we've now given in. I've been waiting so long to share this book and all of these stories with you. So it's especially wonderful to be with all of our members and to especially with those of you who are joining us through our new partnership with the Preservation Society of Newport. So I hope that those of you in the DC area will take Charlotte's advice and visit Hillwood soon. We do currently require advanced reservations and timed entry so that we can ensure social distancing. So please do visit our website to learn more. I think Erin's going to put a link in the chat about that for you. But this publication has been in the making for 3 years. It all started when Lauren Salazar, our shop manager, related that there were many requests for a book on the gardens. And I was really eager to do the research for it. So that's how the project was born. I was helped tremendously throughout this process. As I said, Charlotte, our International Council member and close advisor, as you know, also wrote the foreword. Eric Kowalczyk, who I am so thrilled is actually with us and will be able to answer questions tonight at the end at the Q&A session. He shot the gorgeous photographs that really are the glory of the publication. I also have to thank, of course, Ellen Charles, who is Marjorie Post's granddaughter, and she is Hillwood's president emerita, and she shared her insights about Grandmother's Garden. Rizzoli International, the publisher of the book, they were a true joy to work with. Philip Reeser, our editor especially, and brilliant, brilliant designers. The layout of the book is just, I think, absolutely beautiful. And then, of course, I want to thank Hillwood staff, and especially Lynn Rosati, who was sort of my partner in crime, and the curatorial and library staff were very, very responsive and helpful. So thanks to everyone. It's, as you know, it takes a village. And I will be using many of the absolutely luscious images from the book. So you can see for yourself how brilliantly Eric has captured the glories of Hillwood's gardens. Okay, so the book is organized in 2 sections. The first part is called Marjorie Merriweather Post's Hillwood. And that is my essay about Marjorie Post's approach to gardens. It has a lot of archival material and wonderful archival photographs, like this terrific one on the screen with Marjorie Post and Lady Bird Johnson. They're right above the Japanese garden. That's what those 2 white blobs are. Those are the Japanese lanterns at the top of the Japanese garden. I really was able to learn so much about how Marjorie Post created Hillwood through my research. And I will be able to give you some details today, but of course you'll have to read the book to get the full story. The second part of the book follows the gardens through the seasons with wonderful photographs from all across the garden, beginning in summer, going through fall, winter, and of course, we saved spring as the grand finale. The captions to the photographs in the second section give a lot of information about how we care for the garden today. And there's particulars about lots of the sculpture. Of course, there's sculpture in every part of the garden, all different sorts of sculpture. And we also talk about the highlights of various trees, some shrubs and plants. So a few themes from the research. I obviously don't have time today to detail all of the new information that I gleaned from the archives, but we will be touching on some of the major themes that I talk about in the first part of the book, in the essay. So the first theme really, and Charlotte talked about this, that this is a garden to be shared. Marjorie Post had a very generous spirit. She very happily shared her great good fortune with others. And of course, her final gift was Hillwood that is shared with anybody who appreciates it. Now, this quote on the screen is from the transfer document where when she transferred Hillwood to the Smithsonian, of course, it was then transferred back to a foundation that she had established. But she says, ours is an age in which proper recognition is being given to the importance of preserving cultural monuments of historic significance. Hillwood's gardens are typical of the best way of life that is fast disappearing. Now, Marjorie Post was born in 1887, and her kind of sensibilities were very much Gilded Age. And she knew that that Gilded Age lifestyle was fast disappearing, and she wished for future generations to be able to learn about it firsthand. So we are the lucky ones who can learn how Marjorie Post lived at Hillwood, because it's still very much just as she left it. Louise Shelton published a book of photographs that were considered to be the best gardens in America. This was in 1924. And it's kind of startling because most of the photographs are black and white. There are several photographs of Hogarcito in the book, which is, I'm sure, why Marjorie Post had a copy of it. It was in her personal library. And Louise Shelton, in her introductory essay, expresses this sentiment that Post really embraced. How few would be content to create a beautiful garden if none could see? In the flower garden, the efforts are for giving back. If a garden is worthy of being shared with our intimates, can we close it to the stranger who may need it even more? The foreign custom of opening the fine places to the public is one that we should freely emulate. And I just think that this is something that, it's 1924, so it was very early in Marjorie Post's lifetime, but I think this sentiment stayed with her, and by the time Hillwood was completed, Marjorie Post had decided it was worthy of being a public institution. Now, Marjorie Post, of course, kept Hillwood in pristine condition year-round, even though she was only in residence there in the spring and the fall. So there are many, many stories about people she'd welcome to wander in the gardens, even when she was out of town. And clearly, as she developed Hillwood between 1955 and 1957, she decided it was worthy of becoming a public institution in its totality, the mansion, the art collection, and the gardens. So how did she approach the garden? And Charlotte captures many of these themes in her foreword, where she says, Hillwood is essentially an offering of beauty to the general public from a woman who had not only the means to endow it, but also first and foremost, the heart, as she stated, to share this with the rest of the world. Marjorie Post did not require a spade to create the garden at Hillwood. It was her vision, her generosity, and her determination that created it, her gift of a living, thriving work of art. There, of course, are no anecdotes about Post digging in the garden herself. She knew a lot about plants and she could speak knowledgeably about them, but she wasn't one to do the planting herself. She did specify the overall design and asked her landscape designers to realize her ideas and to suggest individual trees, shrubs, and plants. So this quote, which I found in a letter that Marjorie Post had written to Macmillan and Company in 1955, shortly after she's taken possession of the property, she writes to the people who were helping her with the renovations. I am wondering if perhaps you might have a line on some garden design firm. I feel I'm going to need some advice on the new garden at Hillwood, and will be wanting to contact as large and as well organized a unit as I can, because I will probably be needing information as to where we can obtain certain types of plants, trees, and so forth, as well as suggestions for arrangements. On the other hand, we may simply need to consult them only for advice. This quote shows her confidence in her own vision for the new gardens at Hillwood, and the ease with which she directed the professionals that helped her realize what was clearly her vision. Now, every garden at Hillwood was meticulously drawn and approved before it was installed. When you start learning about Marjorie Post, you realize she left nothing to chance. She wanted to be sure that she had been understood by the landscape architects, and thus the drawings and her approval before the work began. You can see on this drawing, this is Marjorie Post's handwriting right here. So this is a drawing of the dog cemetery that Perry Wheeler made. And notice that he calls it suggestions for planting and the location of the markers with revised edging. So there's a bit of a backstory about this drawing with the revised edging. Wheeler had sent Post a letter to Topridge in August asking her which type of edging she preferred. And of course, all of these letters are in the archives. So she responds, this is her letter, "Your letter of August 25th has just come, and I am somewhat surprised with your query with regard to the edging. I recall distinctly that back in May or June at the latest, I definitely said that I preferred the A type of edging and requested that you get on with the work and get it finished. I do hope that now you will stop with all these stops, halts, and delays and proceed. It might interest you to know that the Garden Clubs of America are going to visit the gardens at Hillwood on Monday, October 19th. So I am expecting that this small cemetery will be completed in good condition for the arrival of these ladies. Hope that you've had a nice summer. Ours here at Camp Topridge has really been quite perfect." Now you can see that it's dated September of 1959. So I think we can all assume that by October, this small garden was in fact ready for the ladies. Beauty, of course, is a deep theme at Hillwood, from the objects in the collection, the exquisite planning for parties and dinners, and certainly the gardens themselves. Beauty was the overall goal throughout the entire estate. And of course, this is another one of Eric's beautiful, beautiful photographs of course, one of the great splendors of Hillwood, the azaleas in the spring. Of course, we often think of spring as the big season at Hillwood, but if you look through Eric's photographs, there are so many great shots of Hillwood in autumn. Philip Reeser from Rizzoli told me how thrilling it was to be working with us because we had so very many high quality, luscious photographs to choose from. There are literally hundreds of great photographs that we weren't able to put in the book. But I promise you, we'll be able to use them in lots of other ways. But you can see color in her garden in every season. Now, one of the delights of strolling through Hillwood is experiencing the many different moods of the garden, from the most formal in the French parterre, which you see here in an archival image. I want you to just think about the fact that these are students there with the gloves and the pearls and the pumps. And so that's obviously the most formal of Hillwood's gardens. And then very close to it is the blousy informality of the snowball viburnums in bloom around the putting green. So you have both formal and informal areas throughout Hillwood. Seeing those archival images, though, makes it very clear how careful all of the stewards of Hillwood have been to maintaining Post's vision. As you can imagine, it takes meticulous care, a lot of energy, and a zeal for perfection, which has, you know, we certainly feel that way now, but the gardens wouldn't be what they are now if we didn't stand on the shoulders of giants, and all of the people who've been taking care of Hillwood have done a beautiful job throughout the years. Charlotte talked a little bit about this too, that there is this very exquisite relationship between the indoor and the outdoor spaces at Hillwood. And I'm just using the French parterre here as a particularly good example, where you, of course, in Marjorie Post time, you could actually walk out those French doors there from the French drawing room into the French parterre. The views from the windows inside, of course, not possible to look out those windows right now, but during Marjorie Post time, the views out the windows would have been very much a part of the experience of the house and the collections. So now that we have to keep these shades drawn because of maintaining the collections, it's just, we have to use our imagination to remember what is just beyond those shaded windows. And here's another great vista. The lunar lawn, of course, is on the central axis with the foyer at the porte cochere. So in Marjorie Post time, you could, if you were a guest, you could circulate through the house and out the door from the first floor library onto the portico and the lunar lawn. So how Marjorie Post changes Arbormont into Hillwood. Marjorie Post bought the 25-acre estate in 1955 when she was 68 years old. This is a photograph taken for Vogue magazine when she opened the house in 1957 at 70 years old. She's wearing a Charles James dress and well over 250 carats of emeralds in the brooch and the necklace. So she's very glamorous at 70. She spent 2 years renovating the house and the garden, and decided during those renovations that it would be left to the nation as a museum. She wanted to create the perfect setting for her collections and of course a gracious space to entertain and for her to live both indoors and out. Now the word arbormont, of course, means wooded hill, and so it makes sense that it would be called Hillwood. But understand that Marjorie Post owned a previous house she had on Long Island was called Hillwood. And when her daughters, Adelaide and Eleanor, heard that she had bought this property and it was called Arbormont, they were like, oh my goodness, of course it's got to be called Hillwood. And Ellen Charles related to me that, of course, she was happy to acquiesce to what her daughters had suggested. So this is a postcard of Arbormont. It was created by architect John Diebert, and it was built as a residence for Colonel and Mrs. Henry Parsons Irwin. Mrs. Irwin, whose name was Helen, was one of the Blodgett sisters, and she had a sister, Monica, and the Blodgetts built houses for both of their daughters. They built Arbormont for Helen and the Rocks for Monica. The Rocks is across Rock Creek. Both of these houses are built on hilltops, and they were built for sisters, but they're not twin houses. I mean, there's been a sort of apocryphal story that these are twin houses, but they really are not. Arbormont, of course, was placed on an axis with the Washington Monument, which is due south by 5 miles. So here are, these are actually Christmas cards from Arbormont that were given to us by Irwin descendants. The gardens at Arbormont were designed by Willard Gephardt and Rose Greeley. Now, Arbormont reflected the lifestyle and the activities of a family of 5. So it was a lot of stuff for kids. So swimming pool, stable and riding trails. They had a circular rose garden, a greenhouse, and an oriental garden. But when it was Arbormont, the gardens were clearly focused on family activities and sports that children would enjoy. We're just so lucky to have that. I love having these, the Christmas cards from the Irwin family. So of course, Marjorie Post changed Arbormont to suit her needs. So of course, the first thing she removed was the swimming pool. And that was in the area where the dacha was built. Of course, she spent her summers at Camp Topridge, but you know, she was not one to lounge around in the sun anyway. Then what you're looking at, of course, is the French parterre. In the footprint of where the parterre now is, Arbormont had a fish pond. And she removed the fish pond, kept basically that same footprint, but installed the French parterre there, knowing that it was going to be adjacent to the French drawing room, which is fantastic. We're only going to discuss a few of the major changes that Marjorie Post made as she recrafted the estate to suit this very different lifestyle than the Irwins had. But this is one of the major changes that she made. Arbormont had this boxwood LA that went from the portico straight out to the overlook. And that, of course, bisected what would become the Lunar Lawn, Post's biggest outdoor entertaining space. And you know, that it's a little daunting to say, you know, rip out these ancient, huge boxwoods, but Marjorie Post understood that they were going to be bisecting her major entertaining space, and away they went. So we'll see many of the changes that Marjorie makes as we talk about the work of each of these landscape architects. She worked with 2 different firms Innocenti and Webel was established in New York in 1931. They worked at Hillwood 1955 to 1956, and then she worked with Perry Wheeler, and he worked from 56 to 59. So the Innocenti and Webel Gardens at Hillwood, they are the entry drive, major changes to the motor court, and I will talk a little bit more about that. And of course, the French parterre, and then the octagonal garden outside the pavilion. It was a large and important Long Island firm, and Umberto Innocenti was really the man in the field. He was a consummate plantsman. Now, Richard Webel was more academic. He was a beautiful draftsman, and their gardens had a much more European feel and strong formal geometries, axes, and so forth. They were probably this large, well-organized firm that that Macmillan and Company suggested to Marjorie Post to begin with when she bought the property. What you're looking at in that beautiful Eric Kowalczyk photograph is this new woodland walk that we added in 2016, which enabled our visitors to see these beautiful stone terraces up close. That walkway is now dedicated to Adelaide Close Riggs, who was the first president of Hillwood's Board of Trustees, Post's eldest daughter, and of course, Ellen Charles's mother. So you can see, if you walk up the Lower Gate Drive in the winter when the leaves are off the trees, you can look up the hillside and see these beautiful terraces stacked up the hillside. Now, this is a very, very major change that Marjorie Post makes. She wants to have a much more leisurely approach to the house. So instead of going straight in, this is Linnean over here, you go, and this is Arbormont. So there's one entrance, you go straight in, straight to this blind motor court, and you know, it's fine if you've got one or two cars. If you're thinking of major parties and 1,000 people for a garden party, you really do need a different approach. So she wanted this beautiful winding driveway. These are the terraces. These little squiggles here are the terraces that are on this hillside. But you come up this beautiful landscaped driveway, and you come, now it's changed, Innocenti and Webel changed it so that you have a way out, and Service Drive becomes, you know, another exit. So it's a very elegant, practical solution for dropping off guests at the mansion. Now, this is a drawing of the beautiful French parterre, which is connected. So the parterre is here, and then this beautiful little octagonal terrace is connected to it. This is the pavilion, and in post time, you could walk out. The stairs are still there, and the door is still there, but you could walk out the pavilion into this beautiful little pocket terrace. It becomes kind of an anteroom to the French parterre. So you can imagine being able to walk out the pavilion into the terrace, through the pavilion, the French parterre, and then you could actually walk back in to the French drawing room if you were lucky enough to be one of Marjorie Post's guests. And this is a wonderful Eric Kowalczyk photograph of that octagonal, that beautiful octagonal garden room outside the pavilion. And you can go either through that little ivy-covered walkway into the French parterre, or you can walk past those Belgian hares and into the bituminous paths where you can stroll through the azalea gardens. So the second landscape architect that the firm she worked with was Perry Wheeler. Adrian Higgins, in a Washington Post article in 2017, called him an urbane Southerner. I love that. He was born in Georgia, had a BA in landscape architecture, moved to DC after his World War II service in the camouflage unit. And he worked for a lot of DC tastemakers. I think Perry Wheeler is probably best known for his work with Bunny Mellon on the White House Rose Garden. And that was, of course, in 1961. And you'll note that he worked on the Rose Garden at Hillwood in 1957. So we had him first. Anyway, he did some refinements to the motor court that, of course, had been originally designed by Innocenti and Wabel, just added more plantings and so forth there. But then the Rose Garden, he kept that circular shape, but he added these crown shapes inside there. It was Marjorie Post, of course, who said, you will keep the circular shape. He also worked on the Lunar Lawn, the Putting Green, the Friendship Walk, and the Dog Cemetery. That we already heard about the Dog Cemetery. And of course, Marjorie Post is buried at Hillwood in the center of the Rose Garden at the base of the obelisk. Another one of Eric's just extraordinary photographs. If you've ever tried to photograph the Rose Garden, it's impossible to photograph it. So I'm impressed with all of his photographs, but this one is extraordinary. Now, there were two major additions to Hillwood's garden during her lifetime. One was Friendship Walk, and the other was the flagpole. And both of them have fascinating stories that are really very well documented in the archival material. And I'll just tell you a little bit about each one. Friendship Walk was organized in secret by Lady Lewis, Madame Augusto Rosso, George Williams, and General and Mrs. H. Conger Pratt. And they wrote only to her intimate friends. And of course, her intimate friends included diplomats, Supreme Court justices, ambassadors, generals, senators, socialites, cabinet members, you know, you name it. And they threw together to buy sculpture, paving, and shrubbery for the walk. And then this quote, a testimonial to Marjorie, we're fully conscious of her love of beauty and the endless care she gives to her gardens. That was in the original letter that these, the five sort of partners in crime wrote to the various people. Now, this is a very typical response. I know of no one more worthy of this recognition than Marjorie Post, or more kind and generous, yet withal so modest. I am delighted and indeed greatly honored to join you in this lasting expression of love. So they all think Marjorie Post is worthy of this recognition. They're honored to be asked, and they know it's going to be a lasting testament of their love for her. It's just very, very touching. So this is the end of Friendship Walk. This is the Four Seasons Overlook. Marjorie Post's intimates knew very well how sophisticated was her taste in the decorative arts. And it's reflected in each piece of sculpture on Friendship Walk. What you're looking at here are lead cherubs that represent the four seasons, and they're an extremely rare group, and they were cast in England in the late 18th century. They're set on limestone bases, and I think you can make out that on the outside of the limestone bases are the cast the names of all of the people who participated. Then in the very back, you might have a hard time making that out, but there are 3 really wonderful eagles, and they were, they're by Paul Wayland Bartlett, and they were given by his stepdaughter, Caroline Ogden Jones Peter. One of the great delights of researching this book was to look at all of these original materials. Telegrams, thank you notes, bills. I mean, she kept every single piece of paper ever. So what you're seeing here, Commander Clyde B. Alt, who was Hillwood's general manager, organized the staff to purchase this flagpole, which looks quite nautical. And he knew that she would be delighted with the idea, and with his nautical presentation of it in the telegram. I mean, this telegram is pure genius. Now hear this, now hear this. To the Commodore, I love that he's calling Marjorie Post the Commodore. To the Commodore, all hands of all branches of the service. Of course, we're now talking about all of the staff members from the various, from Topridge and Mar-a-Lago and so forth. All branches of all service salute you on your birthday and beg to present to you, in honor of this special occasion, flagstaff with yardarm to fly the stars and stripes, and house ensign aboard the flagship Hillwood. Positive bearings to the Commodore's decision. Respectfully, officers and crew. I mean, we don't do that anymore. This is just, it's so great. So what, when Alt wrote to the staff members, he said the one thing that Hillwood lacks is a flagstaff and yardarm, so that once again, the house ensign can fly, reminiscent of Sea Cloud. So staff from all, there are 4 different properties. So Hillwood, Mar-a-Lago, Camp Topridge, and Rosewall, because she was married to Herbert May, and that was his property outside of Pittsburgh. They were, all the staff was invited to participate to any extent you might wish. And there was a complete outpouring of response. Over 100 contributions came in, from $2 to $300. So there, if you go to Hillwood today and look at the base of this flag pole, you will see 8 bronze tablets that bear the names of all the participants. So what you're looking at here is a calligraphed presentation page that has all of the names of all of the participating staff members, and she was presented that on this weekend of celebration. Her birthday's in March, and of course it took the summer to get the flagpole to exist and organize this weekend of celebration. All of the staff, of course, were invited to come. They were put up in hotels from Friday through Sunday and given tickets to the symphony. And then this event was on Saturday, October 20th, 1962. And what I love is this Carrie Russell, who worked for Marjorie Post and Herb May. And she says, "I believe you to be the 2 most marvelous and exceptional persons in the world to open that beautiful home to all of us and to treat us so royally. I felt like Cinderella most of the time." And of course, you'll note that she wrote her thank you note a day after she got home. The other note is from a dear friend of hers, Gerson Nordlinger, and he was a friend who attended the ceremony. And I love his comment too. "You've heard the old saying that no man is a hero to his own valet. I guess you're the exception needed to prove the rule. For it's obvious that your heroine, goddess, and Lady Bountiful rolled into one for everyone from the gardeners up." The more you research Marjorie Post, the more impressed you are with her intelligence, but of course, her humanity. She was just marvelous. So that's the first part of the book with a historical essay. And now we'll turn to the second part of the book, that has, you know, the photographs of the seasons. We've seen some of the beautiful photographs as we've been talking about themes and the history of the garden, but now I just have the excuse to show you more of these fabulous photographs that Eric took. So we start with the summer, and this, you know, glorious deep green photograph of the woodland path, which of course is a great respite from a Washington, D.C. summer. We installed it in 2016, and it's dedicated to Adelaide Close Riggs. And it's just a marvelous photograph. Then, of course, summer wouldn't be summer without the cutting garden, one of our most important gardens. And it's important because we use the flowers from the cutting garden, and our marvelous floral designer, Amy Wilbur, made this glorious arrangement of summer flowers that you see in the French drawing room. This is such an inviting scene, the lunar lawn in summer. You just feel like having pulling up one of those blue chairs and sitting under the umbrellas. I promised you beautiful photographs of the Japanese garden in the fall. Of course, it's photogenic in every season, but the fall photographs are just outstanding. And as you know, we do a lot with chrysanthemums in the fall. And this is one of another glorious photograph of Eric's. There were so many great photographs of the ginkgo that it was painful settling on only two to show. It was really hard. There's just so many gorgeous ginkgo photographs, but I have to say, I really do love the close-up of the ginkgo leaves at the base of the tree. Now, Eric managed to get magnificent shots of Hillwood in every season. He came intermittently over 2 years, and he captured the campus in every sort of weather, including snow and fog, in the early morning, in the late afternoon light. This is a particularly perfect shot of the lunar lawn on a very snowy day. More winter scenes, my photogenic Japanese style garden. And of course, this is Eros in the motor court. And the two giant cedars in the cutting garden in the snow, making that wonderful archway. Now, it's winter outside, but in the greenhouse, we know that spring is on the way. And this is you know, you really can see how much work goes on in the greenhouse to get ready for spring. Hillwood's cherry blossoms. We seriously considered this photograph as the cover for the book because you can see the obelisk in the back, so that was kind of poignant, and the sculptures, the terracotta sphinxes in the front. We did kind of wind up with the reverse of this photograph as a very intriguing cover for the book. Whoops, sorry. This is a lovely shot of the rambling roses in the rose garden. As you know, the rambling roses have a very short season and they only bloom once. Although when they do, of course, it's magnificent. What I love about having this book is that you're able to really stroll through Hillwood's gardens. No matter what the season, you can have the rambling rose, you can see the rambling roses. Or if you've missed a season or a particular plant or shrub in bloom. This book was especially poignant this year when we had to be closed for, what's considered the most brilliant season at Hillwood. But we do have spectacular photographs of spring. And here's one of them. Every year, this edge at the edge of the bed in the lunar lawn is different. So it was great to have captured this particularly glorious year with the double tulips that look like so many peonies in the front there. And then, of course, all of these lipstick color tulips from another year. And of course, there are many, many magnificent shots of azaleas. How could you not have great shots of azaleas at Hillwood? And you know, they're just Eric's photographs are just so spectacular. Although I will tell you that my very favorite picture in the book is the last one. And this is an archival photograph of Ellen Charles's debutante ball at the Chevy Chase Club in 1955. And it's opposite the her memories of Marjorie Post Gardens and her thoughts on keeping up this living legacy that is Hillwood. But I have said to her, if you had known in 1955 that we were going to need a great photograph, it couldn't have been better, with Dina Merrill, Ellen Charles, Adelaide Close Riggs, and Marjorie Post all there in their floral gowns. It's just too perfect. And her essay is marvelous, really marvelous. So thank you. I really appreciate being able to share all of this with you and look forward to any questions you might have. And Eric is going to join me so you can ask him how he does it.
Thank you so much, Kate. That was a really wonderful chance to walk through the gardens, and we've gotten some good questions and comments from folks all around. Especially the most recent one was a shout out to Eric for the beautiful ginkgo photo, which we'll probably be able to recreate in much less skill very soon.
I'm telling you, it is not, you think you just, the gardens are so beautiful, you just point and shoot. No.
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 Well, our first question, as I said, we've got a bunch of wonderful questions pouring in, but please do submit more. We've got lots of time to chat together. But we've got, I'm going to start off with a softball question, Kate.
Okay.
That is how the lunar lawn got its name.
Oh, well, the lunar lawn is so named because it is in the shape of a half moon. And of course, it's a very poetic way to describe it. So that's
excellent. It's always nice to start with one that you don't have to think too hard for, because that's something that we do reference time and time again. Victoria Wood asked a question about whether any additional family dogs will be buried in the dog cemetery.
No, I believe we're full up in the dog cemetery, and there are, but it's great to go through. And the book we describe, Ellen Charles was very kind and went through who are the dogs, who did they belong to, all the names and so forth. That's all in the book, all of the details there.
We also got a question about the mature boxwood. Betsy Klebat asked about whether those were transplanted when Post took them up from what is now the lunar lawn. Did they move to any other location? Were they saved? Anything along those lines?
Right. The apocryphal story, or maybe it isn't, maybe it's true. The story is that they were moved to be around the putting green.
Excellent. Eric.
Yes.
Rick asked what advice you would give to an amateur photographer who'd like to get their best shot of Hillwood's gardens.
Well, it's best if you can get there as early as possible and stay as late as possible. But I don't think you'll be let in at 6 in the morning or be able to stay there until 7 or 8 at night. But otherwise, I but I always tell people, make sure that, you're shooting into the sun so that the subject is between you and the sun. And it just gives you, it's so much richer, and it helps to make sense of the scene in question.
Fran just asked what you found the most challenging place at Hillwood.
Oh, when you get a lot of green on green, it's often hard to separate. But again, if you have the right light, it's much easier to do. But I think one of my favorite overall area might be the Japanese garden, because it's so rich with possibilities. And
You can tell that there are only a bajillion photographs
yes,
of the
it's
Japanese
true. It's
garden.
true. It's true.
It is really hard to pick my favorite of your photographs of the Japanese style garden, especially because it does pop through each season. Amy Peck Abraham asked why the lawn furniture is blue, and whether you have any ideas, Kate, on why Marjorie Post picked blue.
I don't. I mean, maybe that's a question for Ellen. I don't really know the answer to that. All I know is that the chairs have been redone a couple of times over time, but the umbrellas are exactly the way they were. So that's really, that was the blue and white that Marjorie Post had.
And very much in vogue in the era.
It's and they're quite graphic. I mean, they're really, I think they're wonderful, and they're actually quite comfortable.
They really are. I miss having meetings in those chairs. Jim Higgins asked if Marjorie Post ever saw and enjoyed Hillwood's gardens in the summer or the winter seasons.
Well, yes, there are a couple of occasions. We do have pictures of Hillwood with Christmas presents. So I do think she did spend a few Christmases at Hillwood's, or at least one. I mean, I know we have those photographs. And she didn't go to Topridge until around July 4th. So she had a little bit of the summer. But honestly, Washington summers, if you could be in the Adirondacks, I'm not so sure. Anyway.
Here's one of your favorite topics, Kate. Is our perimeter fence sufficient for keeping deer at bay? And if not, do we have any advice to share on keeping the deer out?
But if you know me, you know I hate deer. I'm sorry. I know that probably like ruined my reputation now, but they're so destructive to the garden. The fence that we have is really quite successful. Sometimes, because we obviously have to open the gates. Sometimes we open the gates and the deer will run in, and sometimes that's how they get in. But the fence is really pretty, and of course it's all the way around. You can't ever let a breach happen. Obviously, sometimes trees fall in the woods and they fall on the fence line. And we have to have that repaired like immediately. We have long fence on speed dial to, get the fence repaired right away.
Eric, Kathy
Yes.
Bird asked, as a photographer, whether you have any unique perspectives on the garden, its design, the angles, and what you've noticed over the space and its nature as you spent so much time in the gardens over 2 years.
Yeah, well, it's just so different every season, and probably what I like most about it, it's the sense of there being rooms, because I'm primarily an interiors photographer, and I love the idea of rooms and the enfilade that you get, and the layering you can achieve. So that's probably it.
I agree, and I think that you help really highlight that cocoon feeling that you get from those garden rooms. Janine also asked Eric if we had great photographs in the book of the cutting garden in bloom.
Oh yes, we do. Quite a few. And there's some great ones in the fog as well, which are among my favorites. I
I
think that,
love those.
yeah, that might have been my very first day working on this project. I showed up and there was the fog, which was fantastic. And it was,
I was ecstatic over that.
yes, and I never, it rarely happened again. Maybe once again, it happened in 2 years. And
Gonna say,
also I
I
could
think
share
I
a little,
remember.
yeah, I could also share a little secret about that, about the snow scenes. I think we accomplished all those on one day.
You did.
I remember Kate emailing me in the morning, just get over here as quickly as possible. I've told people not to walk in the snow, not to leave any footprints.
Don't
So I
touch
rushed
anything.
over. I rushed over and it was gone in a couple hours. It was amazing. But we have so little snow anymore here in Washington. So
Kate, do you have a favorite season in the garden?
No, actually, I really don't. That garden is beautiful in every season. Although I have to say, if you've never experienced Hillwood in the spring, you have to experience walking through the azaleas in bloom. I mean, it's just it's otherworldly. But of course, the summer is great for the cutting garden. It's great for that new, the new pathway that we have. The Japanese garden. The Japanese garden is beautiful in the springtime when the weeping cherries are in bloom, but it is spectacular in the fall. And of course, fall is also leaf peeping at Hillwood. So since we have 25 acres, 13 of which are woodlands, it's a great fall season. Now, as Eric said, it doesn't snow all that much, so it's hard to get those, crisp winter shots.
But we do have, the hardscape really does enhance the winter view.
Mhm.
Heidi Dearson asked if there are any aspects of the original design that we are addressing because of climate change, or things that we are already kind of monitoring in terms of what plantings or geography may need to shift.
Well, you may recall that we used to have two very big blue spruces right as you enter between the visitor center and that brick wall that is the outside of the motor court. There were two very large blue spruces, and we had to take them out because blue spruces simply cannot survive anymore in Washington, D.C., now that the climate has changed. It's simply too warm. And they were just, dead, sort of hulking shells there, and we had to take them down. So there's definitely plantings that we're working with, and the gardeners are very aware of that.
I'll also chime in and say that I know that our horticulture team has done a lot about enhancing native plants. There's that, newly redesigned planting bed over by the cafe. And so we are working very hard to be good stewards of the land, of course,
And
in addition to the challenges that we're
pollinators,
facing.
Planting for pollinators, we try to make the bees and the butterflies and so forth happy with the gardens as well.
And the cutting garden is always such a great place to really see those animals sharing and enjoying post Hillwood. Victoria Wood asked whether the Friendship Walk could have possibly really been a surprise. Do we know whether she had a sense it was coming?
No, I do think it was a complete surprise, but what you have to understand, and this I just didn't want to go into, there's a lot of details that are in the book that I obviously can't relate, but they didn't execute Friendship Walk. What they did was they worked with Commander Alt to say, where would it be? Then they worked with Perry Wheeler, who actually drew it. They bought the sculptures and so forth, but they didn't implement it because they wanted to be sure that she actually wanted it, there. But no, they didn't like implement the whole thing.
And keeping an eye on the clock, we've got a bunch of really wonderful questions, but I think a good one to end on is Bob asked whether the garden documents in the archives are open for researchers or for members. I know that many of them are included in the book, and I'm going to go ahead and drop a link into the chat again for folks on how to reserve copies from the museum shop right there.
Well, what I'll say is that some of the archives that I've been using are from the Bentley, which is at the University of Michigan. A number of Hillwood's archives were transferred in the early 1980s to the Bentley, which is a very important archive in, as I said, in Michigan. So some of them are there, and they are very much accessible to the public. Some of them are at Hillwood, and you might be aware that we are undergoing a very big project to create a collections and research center where we will be relocating our archives. And because the current archives, believe me, are really not accessible, and it's because they are physically not accessible. When I tell you working in there, you cannot turn around, that's not an exaggeration. You can't turn around. So what we're doing now is building this new collections and research center. We'll be rehousing all of these archives, and within the next few years, they really should be a whole lot more available at Hillwood than they have been up to this point.
Excellent. Thank you so much for a wonderful evening and a great virtual tour of the gardens. Eric, thank you for joining us and sharing some of your favorite spots and tips of Hillwood's gardens, and for sharing the beautiful photographs throughout the book. It has been a wonderful way to celebrate the beginning of fall here, and I do hope that we'll have lots of folks who are able to come and visit us soon. Again, we've got lots of wonderful programs coming up throughout the month of September, so I do hope that all of our participants will join us again, and shortly you will get a prompt to go to SurveyMonkey and share your feedback. We are continually working to get better as we adapt to these virtual lectures. So please share your thoughts and comments, and we hope to see you at Hillwood soon. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.